8 men and 8 women were dropped on opposite sides of a deserted island. They were unaware of each other's presence. The only equipment they carried was a few survival knives. The 2 groups had to survive on the island for 30 days, facing food shortages and harsh environments. Which team would come out on top? If they encountered each other midway, what kind of sparks would fly? Would conflicts escalate, or would they help each other? Let's wait and see. This episode, Bear once again took 8 women to the uninhabited island. They were all homemakers in their daily lives, with virtually no survival experience. Suddenly arriving in such an unfamiliar environment, the women were visibly worried. After reaching the destination, Bear briefed them on the precautions. Then, one by one, they quickly jumped into the water. Fortunately, all of them could swim. The first to reach the shore was actually a disabled person. Opening the box, she found her prosthetic leg inside. As the other participants made it ashore, they briefly introduced themselves. Then Bear sped off to pick up the men's team. As for the equipment this time, it was still the same old items. 3 survival knives, 2 emergency water bottles, and a medical kit. Apart from that, there were some filming tools. After settling in, they began discussing their next steps. First, they had to cross the jungle to leave the beach. Meanwhile, on the other side, 8 men were heading toward the island. Bear found a landing spot and sent them off the yacht. Soon they all made it ashore. As they started introducing their professions, one participant, Rizwan, suddenly had an issue. Since he was a mobile phone shop owner in daily life, he knew nothing about survival. Less than 2 minutes after landing, Rizwan suddenly sat on the shore and broke down crying. Seeing this, his teammates immediately comforted him. The plan to discuss their route had to be postponed. Half an hour passed, but he still showed no sign of stopping. Since they had just met and weren't very familiar yet, the teammates could only wait for him to finish crying. This wasted a lot of their time. While others explored the area, they found a coconut tree. Unfortunately, it was too tall to reach. They initially planned to camp on the beach that night, but the rough tides made them reconsider. Before they knew it, 2.5 hours had passed. By then, the women's team had already been trekking through the jungle for an hour. Using the sound of the ocean, they roughly deduced the direction of the beach. The group dynamic was relatively harmonious. However, due to Hannah's disability, walking was difficult for her. Before long, her prosthetic limb began rubbing painfully. Her teammates suggested she take a break if needed, but Hannah insisted the pain was nothing. After barely replenishing some water, they pressed on. After 2.5 hours of grueling progress, a glimmer of light finally appeared ahead. Eagerly, they rushed toward it. This was the beach they had been longing for. According to the map, this was the most suitable place to settle. Just from the start, the women's team was already far ahead of the men's. Later, they even found many starfish on the shore. But after taking a bite, the taste was unbearably sour. Then, 57-year-old Erica gathered everyone to start working. They needed to tidy up the area into a proper campsite. The top priority, however, was starting a campfire. They used the traditional friction fire starting method. Whether due to luck or skill, within just half an hour, a small spark appeared. With steady breaths fanning the flames, the campfire successfully produced smoke. No one expected starting a fire would be this easy. The teammates began cheering excitedly. With the campfire, the challenge difficulty dropped by a whole level. While the women's team had already started setting up camp, the men's team hadn't even made it out of the jungle yet. Because Rizwan kept holding them back, they had to stop and rest frequently, slowing the entire team's progress. As night fell, they had no choice but to spend the night in the jungle. There was no point in building proper bedding. They simply slept on the ground, huddling for warmth. In contrast, the women's team was much more comfortable. They gathered around the campfire, chatting, sharing stories about their lives. However, at around 1 a.m., Cassie, one of the camerawomen, suddenly woke up in distress. She said she couldn't sleep at all. The thought of enduring this lifestyle for a whole month made her feel like she couldn't last. So she told her teammates she wanted to quit. Because of this, almost none of them got any sleep that night. By the next morning, Cassie still felt terrible. She had no choice but to call the production team. Her teammates were frustrated by her decision. After all, they had only just arrived the day before, and someone was already giving up after a single day. As the yacht slowly approached, Cassie went home amid her teammates' complaints. Now down to 7 members. They split into smaller groups. 2 or 3 went to search for fresh water, while the rest stayed at camp to tend the fire. But just then, Hannah got stung by a scorpion. A sharp pain instantly spread through her arm. Though the venom wasn't deadly, the pain was unbearable. This meant that for the next few days, Hannah would have to rest in camp. Meanwhile, the men's team was still trekking through the jungle. After walking for 3 hours straight, they finally reached a beach. But upon closer inspection, they realized it was too close to the tide, not suitable for long-term shelter. The good news was a small stream nearby, so water wouldn't be an issue. Some of them even took a quick bath in the pool. But to drink the water safely, they needed to boil it first, which meant testing their fire-starting skills. And in that regard, they were far behind the women's team. After struggling for hours, they still couldn't get a fire going. At one point, Rizwan even started praying for divine intervention. They kept at it from afternoon until night, with all 8 men taking turns for 5 hours straight. Finally, at 10 p.m., they succeeded. Now they could sleep on the ground in peace. By the 3rd day, 2 members of the women's team found a small pond in the jungle. The water tasted slightly salty, with a faint sulfuric smell, but they thought boiling it might make it drinkable. So they filled 2 large bottles and brought them back to camp. Since Alice, the doctor in the group, approved it, everyone trusted that the water was safe, even though it looked a bit like iced tea. By the time they boiled it, night had already fallen. Each of them took a cup and forced themselves to drink it, ignoring the nausea. But the next morning, Erica started vomiting. Others also felt unwell. It was obvious. The dirty water was to blame. Over on the men's side, they briefly discussed plans after waking up. Someone suggested finding a better campsite quickly. But then the weather suddenly turned bad. Heavy rain started pouring down. Their relocation plan had to be postponed. On the bright side, the rain provided them with fresh water. However, not everyone was content to wait. Simon argued they should use their remaining energy to find a proper campsite immediately, but Rizwan insisted walking in the rain was impossible. The two quickly got into an argument. By the 3rd morning, while scouting the area, someone thought they spotted a yellow catfish in the water. They called Chris over with his spear. Taking aim at the dark shape, he stabbed down, only to pull up an old pair of jeans. At this point, the guys were clearly getting desperate from hunger. A few days earlier, Simon had discovered a new beach nearby. After discussing it, the group decided to relocate there. They carefully carried their fire in a bamboo tube and packed up their belongings before setting off. The terrain was rugged, strewn with jagged rocks, with hardly any flat ground. Carrying their equipment made the journey especially difficult. Meanwhile, the women's team was searching for food along the shore. Soon, someone spotted a wild cassava plant in the woods. Just one root would be enough to sustain their team. But just as they were about to head back to camp, they suddenly noticed figures in the distance. The men's team had spotted them too. Since neither group knew the other existed, they were completely shocked. Who would have thought there were other people on this deserted island? Both teams quickly approached each other, exchanging hugs. Such an unexpected encounter left everyone exhilarated. Guided by the women's team, the men soon arrived at their camp. Luckily, they had just dug up a cassava root that morning, which Dan cooked for everyone to share. The men, who hadn't eaten in 5 days, were deeply moved. After starving for so long, they could finally have a proper meal. Thankfully, the cassava was delicious and packed with carbohydrates. Once they were full, the women even started discussing which guys they liked. Who knew the women would be the bold ones in this situation? Later, they sat by the shore and got to know each other. When they learned that Elliot from the men's team was a chef, Alice became particularly interested. Her excitement was obvious in every word she said. The group then toured the women's camp. With the sudden increase in numbers, sleeping arrangements became a major issue. On top of that, the women had been drinking dirty swamp water for days. When the men took a sip, they nearly gagged. It was clearly undrinkable. Upon learning they had been fetching water from a swamp, Elliot and his teammates went to inspect it. When they saw the murky pond, they couldn't believe the women had survived 5 days without getting sick. Left with no choice, they had to collect water from the men's old campsite instead. This task fell to Erica, who was nearly 60 years old. The round trip would take at least 2.5 hours. The four of them filled 3 containers with fresh water. The men assumed the women wouldn't have the strength to carry it back, but to their surprise, Erica was stronger than any of them. She didn't rest once, leading the way the entire time. This completely changed the men's perception of her. Soon they returned to camp safely. As they drank the clean, sweet spring water, the women felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. After a short break, Dan from the men's team gathered everyone for a meeting. He pointed out that their current campsite was plagued by bugs and exposed to harsh sea winds, far from comfortable for so many people. Luckily, there was an open clearing not far away, and they could relocate before nightfall. The group scouted the area to assess its advantages. However, the older Erica wasn't keen on living in the jungle. The arrival of the men had already diminished her authority, and now she had to follow their lead, which made her uneasy. In contrast, Hannah was very enthusiastic. She had a knack for handling group dynamics. While the others worked on setting up the new camp, Elliot taught Alice how to make traps in the woods. The two smiled warmly, their chemistry undeniable. Alice was convinced Elliot was a great guy. Their flirting didn't go unnoticed. The others speculated that Alice, being young and attractive, must have taken a liking to Elliot. By evening, with everyone working together, the new campsite had been cleared. For bedding, they piled up palm leaves. As night fell, it was time for them to get to know each other a little better. Day 6. The night had been miserable for everyone. With so many people and no proper bedding, they had no choice but to cram together on the ground. So today, Simon proposed building proper beds. All 15 of them deserved individual sleeping spaces, but easier said than done. Just as he shared the idea with the group, Erica was the first to object. She argued they were too weak from hunger. Fishing at the beach should come first. Simon didn't push back. After all, they were still getting used to each other. In the end, some were sent to search for food, while the rest gathered materials for the beds. During the fishing trip, Hannah's disability worried the others. They assumed mobility would be an issue, but she quickly reassured them. Despite her physical limitations, her spirit was unbroken, earning deep respect from the men. 3 hours passed, and Simon hadn't managed to build a single bed. The women noticed his incompetence, leaving him embarrassed. Erica, impatient, took matters into her own hands. She propped up sticks as a frame, layered leaves on top, and voila, functional bed. Simon could only watch in admiration. Maybe he'd overcomplicated things. Meanwhile, the fishing team returned empty-handed. Elliot found himself missing his girlfriend back home. When Alice learned the truth, she couldn't hide her disappointment. As night fell, dark clouds gathered over the ocean. A storm was coming. Most hadn't grasped the severity yet, but Hannah urged immediate action. They reinforced the shelter with extra palm leaves, ensuring the roof would hold. By nightfall, the storm arrived in full force. Rain poured down in sheets. A team was assigned to protect the fire from drowning. Thunder roared relentlessly. The crowded shelter made conditions even harder. For Hannah, the chaos was triggering. Her wartime trauma resurfaced. The explosions that cost her a leg. The deafening noise. By morning, nobody had slept. Hannah was in terrible shape, haunted by memories of battle. She broke down sobbing. Teammates rushed to comfort her, but nothing helped. Her condition worsened rapidly. With no other options, they called for her evacuation. Soon, a yacht arrived, and Hannah was escorted home. Day 10. Starvation had set in. The group was running on fumes, many showing signs of low blood sugar. Robert, one of the more experienced members, pushed through his own weakness. To lead a hunting party, they fashioned crude spears and ventured into the jungle. Logically, the woods should have been teeming with game. Yet after hours of searching, they found nothing. Then, a crab-filled lagoon came into view, home to wild caimans. But hunting crocodiles was beyond their skills. They settled for scouting the area. A turkey's call echoed in the distance. They combed the foliage, but came up empty again. Back at camp, others scavenged a length of rope from the beach. They unraveled it into threads, planning to weave a fishing net. The project would take days. Whether it'd actually work, that remained to be seen. The hunting party returned to camp empty-handed. Robert, who had led the expedition, felt deeply ashamed. He'd wanted to prove himself to the team, but now they had nothing to show for it. While everyone was worrying about survival, Alice from the women's team shifted her attention to Patrick. Her previous interest was taken, and the 19-year-old Patrick's youthful vigor appealed to her. They started spending more time together, chatting whenever they could. Normally, this would be harmless, but Rizwan from the men's team grew increasingly uncomfortable. Living daily with half-naked women clashed with his cultural beliefs. Compared to survival, this was the real struggle for him. After a sleepless night of deliberation, Rizwan announced his decision to quit the next morning. He claimed the challenge was too difficult, that he couldn't endure it any longer. The religious concerns were just an excuse. He made the call at the shore, and soon departed on a rescue boat. Now down to 13 participants, the next morning brought new troubles. Robert developed a painful abscess near his teeth, leaving him in constant discomfort. Fortunately, Dan was a surgeon. After examining Robert, he proposed a simple procedure, lancing the abscess with a knife to drain the pus. Using their limited medical supplies, Dan administered local anesthesia and made a quick incision. The procedure took less than 2 minutes. Almost immediately, Robert felt significant relief. That afternoon, Simon suggested another water run to their usual spot, but the women were busy weaving the fishing net and refused to help. Left with no choice, Simon and a few others made the 2-hour trek alone. By the time they returned, the net was finally complete. Now came the challenge of deploying it at sea. Robert and Simon volunteered for the task. Entering the water, they immediately faced stronger than expected currents. Just swimming was difficult enough. Properly setting the net seemed impossible. After struggling for over 10 minutes, and reaching about 50 meters out, a powerful wave suddenly ripped the net from their hands. It vanished into the sea. Returning to camp with the bad news, they faced the women's fury. Days of meticulous weaving, wasted in seconds. Meanwhile, Alice and Patrick's flirtations continued. Their behavior was becoming obvious to everyone. Patrick openly admitted to his teammates that he liked Alice. Another day passed. The men tried fishing with improvised lines, made from scissor wire, but their success rate was dismal. Malnutrition was taking its toll. Fainting spells from low blood sugar became frequent in camp. Patrick, already frail, collapsed weakly on the ground. Alice rushed to his side, but it was just temporary dizziness. No serious danger. Realizing their worsening condition, the women set out to forage. They combed a new stretch of jungle, hoping to find more cassava. After hours of searching in circles, they somehow ended up back at their original beach. There, miraculously, they discovered another discarded fishing net. Washed ashore, the team celebrated their luck. With this second chance, they could try fishing again, but they couldn't afford another mistake. This time, they devised a careful plan and assembled a larger team to properly secure the net in the water. They carried the fishing net toward the shore. 6 of them formed a line and entered the water. Under Robert's leadership, it took them 20 minutes to finally set up the net. But just as they started swimming back, a massive wave suddenly crashed over them, scattering everyone in different directions. Seeing the dangerous situation unfold, the elderly Erica broke down in tears. Each person struggled back to shore on their own. However, once on land, they realized Robert was missing. After waiting anxiously with no sign of him, the group hurried back to camp to call for rescue. Meanwhile, Robert had been swept to a different stretch of beach. To return to camp, he'd have to navigate the treacherous rocky shoreline, an enormous challenge in his weakened state. Timing his movements between waves, he sprinted across exposed sections. Miraculously, he made it back safely. Hearing his ordeal, his teammates expressed sympathy. At least the net had been successfully secured this time. As night fell, the group discussed safety concerns. Losing their lives for a television show simply wasn't worth it. The next morning, while the women still slept, Simon took a team to check the net. They expected no catch so soon, but to their astonishment, a large shape was tangled at the bottom. A plump shark. Excitement erupted. They hauled their prize ashore. Its size promised enough meat to feed everyone properly. Back at camp, the women reacted with even greater enthusiasm. They hung the shark from a tree branch, gutted it efficiently, and carved thick slices for grilling. The first bites brought unanimous praise. After half a month of starvation, this was what real food tasted like. For once, They could rest with full stomachs. But greater challenges loomed. The true dangers of wilderness survival could prove fatal in an instant. Day 18. During her morning walk along the shore, Erica found an injured seabird. Though conflicted, she recognized it as vital protein. Fighting back tears, she decapitated the bird and plucked its feathers by the water's edge. The meager portions meant the most only got to nibble on bones for flavor. With energy levels critically low, daily life in camp had become lethargic. Only a few still mustered strength for chores. Soon after, Robert spotted a stingray near shore. He and teammates grabbed spears and charged, but their flimsy equipment shattered after a few strikes. The failed hunt left Dan frustrated. Fishing seemed their only option now. Another day passed. Patrick grew closer with Saran, who casually mentioned they now shared sleeping space at night. What transpired remained unspecified. The young man's romantic luck drew comments. 2 women's interest in just 2 weeks. But survival took precedence over courtship. Surveying their dwindling food reserves, Dan grew increasingly concerned. Since arrival, they'd never ventured beyond the immediate area. Now Dan proposed a bold reconnaissance mission. New territories might hold untapped resources. The group voiced no objections. As they debated team composition, a wild turkey suddenly wandered into camp. A cautious encirclement began. The bird proved alarmingly fast, covering meters in seconds. Saran attempted capture, but hesitated at the critical moment. When the turkey bolted uphill, the entire group gave chase. Their urban backgrounds showed clumsy movements and poor coordination. Let the bird outmaneuver them repeatedly. Somehow, Patrick eventually got hold of it and swiftly twisted off its head. Regardless of methods, meat was back on the menu tonight. Since no one had experience handling wild poultry, they initially wanted to assign the task to elderly Erica. But the old woman's compassion got the better of her. She refused to kill it. Left with no choice, others had to pluck the feathers instead. As night fell, the group enjoyed their hard-earned meal. Everyone fought for extra portions. Young Patrick even gnawed on the chicken head, crunching through bone fragments. Despite the unpleasant texture, by morning, Patrick developed alarming symptoms. During his bathroom visit, he left trails of blood, undoubtedly from last night's bone-filled meal. Sharp fragments had lodged near his rectum, causing bleeding with every bowel movement. The pain surpassed even eating spicy peppers. Noticing his distress, Dan immediately examined Patrick. Upon identifying the blockage, he led Patrick to a private spot for manual extraction. The graphic procedure went unrecorded, but post-surgery, Patrick regained normal bodily functions, albeit with lingering embarrassment. Day 20. Following Dr. Dan's suggestion, a hunting party set out at dawn, without breakfast. Their mission: scout resource-rich new territories, possibly requiring overnight stays. Fearing jungle disorientation, Dan chose the coastal rock route, a dangerous decision requiring completion before high tide. The slippery rocks challenged their footing, especially while carrying gear. Dan, however, moved ahead recklessly, ignoring struggling teammates. Tensions nearly erupted into arguments. After 2 grueling hours, weather deteriorated as they reached a cliff. Most crossed safely until Patrick's turn. His handhold crumbled, sending him plummeting 5 meters. He lay motionless upon impact. The team sprang into action, assessing injuries while calling for rescue. With tides rising dangerously, they moved Patrick to level ground. A rescue yacht arrived promptly, though rough waves prevented docking. Medics swam ashore, confirming no fractures despite the fall. After quick consultation, rescuers urged immediate camp return. Before tides trapped them, a helicopter evacuated Patrick to a hospital 100 kilometers away. Diagnosis revealed only soft tissue damage, non-life-threatening but ending his participation. Down to 11 survivors, the challenge continued. Next day, overnight storms washed ashore, countless small fish, a miraculous bounty. The team spent morning hand-catching them, filling an entire bucket. Grilled to perfection, the fish provided unprecedented protein surplus, multiple portions per person.
I dedicate these fish to our really good friend Paddy. Cheers to Paddy.
This island can be...
Day 22. Torrential rains returned. halting all outdoor work. Another idle day passed in shelter. When the rain finally stopped, the group discussed going hunting in the jungle again. Since they had caught a turkey before, they might get lucky this time too. They combed through the undergrowth, spotting several large lizards along the way, but the creatures were too fast to catch. In the end, the hunt yielded nothing. After resting at camp for half an hour, Elliot grew restless. Grabbing a fishing rod, he headed out to prove he could still contribute. Soon his line jerked violently. With an excited yank, he reeled in a small fish, only for teammates to identify it as a toxic pufferfish. Their disappointed expressions crushed Elliot, though the attempt strengthened his resolve to keep fishing. For lunch, Erica found a small lizard, lightly grilled, its meager meat provided a few bites per person. Next day, gnawing hunger drove them to search again. Dan led another turkey hunting expedition, but instead of game, his machete accidentally slashed his thigh. Blood gushed from the wound. Aborting the trip now would waste their effort, so Dan stitched the injury himself on site. Within 30 minutes, he'd stabilized the wound with needle and thread. Continuing their search, they discovered wild cassava roots and fresh sugarcane. No turkey, but ample carbohydrates. Meanwhile, back at camp, others checked their snare traps. To their shock, one had caught a turkey. Dee beheaded it instantly, swelling with hunter's pride. By nightfall, their combined haul, sugarcane, cassava, and turkey, roasted over the fire. After prolonged deprivation, this feast lifted everyone's spirits, stabilizing team morale. Day 25. Chronic malnutrition left them gaunt. Dan documented alarming weight loss, over 5 kilograms per person. Strangely, the women celebrated their slimmer figures. Their resilience against hunger outpaced the men's. As expected, Alice led a foraging team into the jungle, while Erica and Roselle combed the shore for oysters. Simon, sidelined by a foot injury, fought guilt over his inactivity. Ignoring the wound, he limped to the beach to scavenge, only worsening his condition. Dan could merely dress the aggravated injury. The jungle team struck gold, a tree heavy with fresh lemons. The tart burst of flavor, after weeks of bland survival food, boosted morale instantly. They also gathered snails and limpets, enough for a modest but energizing dinner. As night fell, the seafood was divided equally, ensuring everyone received vital nutrients. Another day passed, with the island's weather remaining unpredictable. Rain one moment, sunshine the next. Early in the morning, Robert stumbled upon a dead animal carcass while walking along the shore. At first, he thought it might make a decent meal, but after Dr. Dan took a whiff, he declared the meat already rotten. Eating it could be fatal. Reluctantly, they had to discard it. By noon, seeing his teammates busily working, Simon grew restless and decided to make himself useful. He found a sturdy stick and began crafting a bow, hoping it might help with hunting. Meanwhile, Erica and the others returned from foraging empty-handed again. Another night. A violent storm raged through the night, but they endured. The heavy rain persisted until morning, forcing them to quickly weave palm fronds into roofing to reinforce their shelter against the downpour. When the skies finally cleared, Simon was nearly finished with his bow, but as they tried to string it, the unheated wood snapped in half under tension. Simon stared in dismay. His craftsmanship had failed. Meanwhile, Dan busily gathered scallops by the shore. On his way back to camp, he spotted a caiman lurking motionless in a swamp. This was their chance for a major food source. Excited, Dan rushed back to camp and proposed a hunting party for the caiman. With limited volunteers, Simon and Ben stepped up. Simon's foot injury had improved over the days, and for the next several days, the two men tracked the reptile. They combed through the jungle relentlessly. Day 28. Their persistence paid off. At the swamp's edge, they finally found the caiman. Simon's heart pounded as he crept closer, using a rope to lasso the creature's snout. With its jaws secured, Ben seized the moment, wrestling the caiman into submission before delivering a fatal blow to its skull. Shaking with adrenaline, the two hunters marveled at their success. Returning to camp after dark, they were greeted with cheers. The women swarmed them with admiration. This was the kind of bravery they respected. After butchering the caiman, they roasted large chunks over the fire. The rich, fatty meat provided much-needed protein, enough to sustain them for a week. Day 29. Breakfast was another serving of caiman meat. With the challenge ending tomorrow, everyone's spirits lifted. Food was no longer a concern.